The house on Elmwood Lane was quiet. Maggie and Charlie Brewer had always thought their dad was a little odd. Whenever he comes home from work, he spends all his time in the basement, behind that locked door, surrounded by his plants. Their dad was never like this. He used to be lively and spends a lot of time with them riding bicycles to the park. They still remember on Maggie's 10-year-old birthday, their dad took them to the amusement park. It was a memory that the three of them can never forget. Things seemed to have changed in a blink of an eye. One afternoon, Maggie and Charlie decides to try and see what is in that basement. Charlie opens the basement door and takes a peek inside. "What do you see?" Maggie asked. As they are looking into the basement, their dad pulls up on the driveway. "It's too dark, I can't see anything," Charlie answered. "What are you guys doing? I thought I told you two to stay out of the basement." Dr. Brewer, carrying a box of documents and office papers, yells. Maggie and Charlie didn't know what to say as they got caught. "Go to your room," Dr. Brewer demanded. And so they went to their room. Dr. Brewer places the box and sits down. He was fired from his job that same day. As usual, he proceeds down to the basement to tinker with his plants. He stands at a table, angered by the fact that he was terminated, and starts to laugh evilly as the lights flickered. A few days later, Maggie and Charlie are playing catch just outside of their house. Their dad arrived home from doing errands, and they all went inside the house. "There are leftovers in the fridge," Dr. Brewer said, before heading down to the basement again. Maggie and Charlie prepared the leftovers for dinner. "Dad's been acting really strange lately. He's always down at the basement," Maggie said. "We have to find out what he is doing down there," Charlie suggested. And so that night, Maggie and Charlie plan to wake up in the middle of the night together. They sneak outside of the house and to the side where there is a window looking into the basement. It is dark inside, but moments later, the lights turned on. Fear tingles down their spine as they watch their dad enters the basement and begins tinkering with chemicals in beakers. As they watch, something beside Dr. Brewer caught their eyes. Something wrapped in leaves seems to be moving. Then they accidentally made a sound that caught Dr. Brewer's attention. Dr. Brewer looks at the window, but Maggie and Charlie were already gone. The next evening after sunset, Maggie and Charlie are watching TV. They cannot shake off what they saw last night. "What do you think that thing covered in leaves was?" Charlie asked. "Weird noises can be heard coming from the basement." "You know, I say we just go down there and see what is really going on," Maggie suggested. Then a loud yell came from the basement. "Was that Dad?" "Come on," Maggie said. They got up and went straight to the basement. They opened the door and cautiously descended the stairs. When they got to the bottom, it was a long hallway. As they made their way through it, they slowly see a giant plant that appears to have arms. After getting close enough, they discover that it was their dad, except the bottom half of his body is green and covered with vines. "I told you two to stay out of the basement," Dr. Brewer yelled. Maggie and Charlie couldn't believe their eyes, as if they are watching something from out of a horror movie. "Maggie, help me," a voice sounded like Dr. Brewer called from behind a table. Wrapped in leaves, another Dr. Brewer is trapped. "Since you two are here, the plants could use some feeding," the transformed Dr. Brewer said as he approaches Maggie. Charlie is hiding as he watches the terror unfolds. "Maggie, run!" the trapped Dr. Brewer yelled. Maggie runs for her life towards the stairs, but the stairs are covered with deadly vines. "There's no escaping now," the transformed Dr. Brewer said. Maggie fell to the ground, crawling away as the monster slowly approaches her. A large tube is attached to the monster, with what seems to be chemicals pumping into its body. "Charlie, the axe," the trapped Dr. Brewer called. Charlie runs over and takes an axe that was hanging on the wall. "Cut the tube," the trapped Dr. Brewer yelled. As the monster is about to snatch Maggie to feed his plants, Charlie raises the axe high in the air, and with one powerful swing, he chopped the tube in half. Green chemicals of life are spewing from the tube, while the monster growls in pain. The three of them watches as the monster fell to the floor. The plants in the room, once filled with life, became lifeless. Dr. Brewer, Maggie and Charlie are cleaning up the basement. Dr. Brewer, that Maggie and Charlie rescued, seems to have returned to his lively self again. "Just a few more, and we should be done here," Dr. Brewer said. "Dad, I'm so glad you're back," Maggie replied, as Dr. Brewer looks at his daughter and smiles. They put the rest of the garbage in the trunk of the car. "All right, now I just gotta take these to the junkyard," Dr. Brewer said. "Dad, do you still remember my 10-year-old birthday when we went to the amusement park?" Maggie asked. Dr. Brewer stood there as he tries to remember. Maggie and Charlie looks at him patiently. "That was the Garden of Vines, silly," Dr. Brewer replied. Dr. Brewer got into his car. "I'll be back in a bit," Dr. Brewer yelled from inside of his car, and he took off. Maggie and Charlie looks at each other with a worried look on their face. Was the Dr. Brewer they rescued the real Dr. Brewer or a clone?
If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more videos in the future.